Hi, welcome to the COREnology podcast. Thank you so much for being with us. I am back again today with Andrew Howell. I'm so happy to have you with us, Andrew.
Pleasure to be here. I always love to be on this.
How are you?
Fabulous. Doing well.
Good,
Yeah.
good. Well, for those of you that don't realize this, Andrew is one of our founders, and he has been working in the estate planning world for 20 plus years. There's a point when I stopped counting for myself. Um,
Yeah.
but I
23 is the number. And
20, you're still counting.
I'm
Okay,
counting.
23 years.
Yeah. Oh no, I remember every
And
one of them.
he is known for connecting to his clients because he wants to know who they are and why they're that way before he tries to um, help them make decisions on their plans. And it changes the equation for them. All of this history of what he's done with his clients has turned into multiple books. Um, and it's turned into a company, COREnology, which is why I'm around. And so today I really want to talk about this thing we keep mentioning, the great wealth transfer. People mention it all the time. Initially, we were talking about around $86 trillion, but as people have gotten more wealthy and we've had a successful economy, the latest numbers that are being transferred over the next 20 years, it's $126 trillion is being transferred. Did you realize that?
Yeah. I always say 70 to 90 is sort of the ballpark that we've been saying, but
Yep.
yeah, a lot of
120.
wealth has been created in the last few years, so
Oh,
that doesn't surprise me.
a lot of wealth. And every year, um, through inheritance, 3 trillion, 1 to 3, but they estimate $3 trillion is being transferred every single year. And um, in the advisory world, financial advisors are dealing with this on a very serious basis because um, out of the people that inherit wealth, 80% about leave their current financial advisor because they inherit this wealth.
Yeah. I think
And
that's low too, but I think there's also a lot of generational shifts that are going to add to that percentage even getting greater. Because my kids, they want to go to Google, they want to go to some internet
mhm,
AI search on what to buy, follow Pelosi or whatever. But it's not the typical hire a stockbroker and be with them forever.
right. And often they're leaving because they just don't know their advisor. So, um, and I don't want to dig in
Well,
too
it could be
deep to
more
those.
that it could be more their advisor doesn't know them, and I think that's probably the shift in paradigm that we try to have with chronology.
100% well said. Thank you, Andrew. And what I kind of want to do today is talk about a family's perspective, not necessarily the advisor perspective and how to address this, but talk the family and how we know and understand the family and what they're experiencing. And I just want to hear from you. What are some of the biggest challenges you think families are facing as they are transferring this wealth?
Without a doubt, it's communication. They're
Mhm.
not communicating. And for whatever reason, they're not having the conversations that you need to have to address these core values of the family, and identifying them and talking about the life experiences that created those values, and reinvesting in looking at them yearly to see what's changed. And the communication just is not there. I mean, everybody's busy. We're all busy. I'm busy. If I'm not busy, I'm on my device. And so the family just is not communicating. And even when there is the best intention to say, we want to do this, we want to communicate. I understand and agree with some of these philosophies, maybe not all of them, but the idea that, and most people don't want to have trust fund babies, right? The trustafarians. So it's, it's It's just a different way to frame it in terms of saying, hey, this is how you start that communication when even those clients who want to do it don't know how to do it. Say, okay, how can I approach my kids and bring them in such a way that is engaging? And, there's obviously going to be issues sometimes within the family that are roadblocks to even doing that kind of depth of communication. And, so I think that, that's one of our first steps as well, is identifying what those roadblocks are. Is there a member of the family that, for whatever reason, can't participate in this family evolvement? And I don't. And what does that mean? Does it mean that they can plug in at a later time? And how do we orchestrate all of that? Yeah, it's a difficult task.
Well, and I don't think any family says, "Hey, I don't want to talk about this, so there's issues later in life." They just either don't realize that the communication is what needs to happen, or they don't know how to do it.
Right. The clients that think about it, obviously they want to do it without question. I will say this though. I have a handful of clients that will still say to me every year, I'm just give it all to the kids. And if they blow it, who cares? Right. I'm dead. That's how people say that to me still. That's completely 180 degrees from how I view things. But it does happen. But for those clients that say, no, I want to create a legacy. I want that legacy to be a positive one. And what does that actually mean? uh, Starting that communication and having those conversations that lead to that development rather than just, some arbitrary conversation at your family reunion where you tell, war stories about grandpa in World War II. It's nothing wrong with all of that, right? That family lore. I'm not trying to chastise that in any means, but okay, deeper dive into each of the core values of those family members is going to be far more illustrative and helping to bring them in, making them feel like they're part of the family. And I think a lot of our family members, and some of the families that one of their communication problems is that they don't know they can communicate, right? The kids don't know they can speak up. It's still very much the monarchy, mom and dad at the top, and they're doing as ordered, and some of that's definitely breaking out of the mold from what it used to be. But this is, COREnology is absolutely the way in my mind to have that conversation with the family start. And what's nice is it takes it out of parents' hands. They don't have to do it. They don't have to have that uncomfortable
Yep.
conversation because maybe that is. Family dynamics are weird. I still have a lot of families that don't like to talk about money. And then the advisor doesn't necessarily have to do it. Not all of the advisors in the wealth transfer space have the best bedside manner, and maybe we don't want them to. My grandpa had a joke, and I always loved it, which was the way you pick your accountant is if you go into their office and ask them to tell you a joke, and they can actually tell you a joke, don't hire them as an accountant, right? Sometimes you don't necessarily want the big personalities on the team. You want the guys that are cranking the numbers and being able to understand the analytics going on behind the scenes. So I'm not chastising by any means those kind of advisors that are meant to do that type of thing. It's not the way my brain works, but we need that. But even for
Right.
those clients, for those advisors, they have to anticipate their clients are going to be demanding these conversations. And this is an outlet. Look, I'm not good at that. I don't feel
Well,
comfortable in that space. I don't want to waste my time. I'm already busy in my practice other places. This is a plug and play, right? Go and take the survey.
well, one of the studies we saw that came out last year did say that 50% of clients that they interviewed had already left their advisor that year. And they did it. The number one reason is because they didn't think their advisor knew them on a deeper level. It didn't even have to do with how much money they were making.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
these
and that
are
correlates, right?
conversations that are valuable and matter to families.
Without
And
question.
so for those of you that are not aware of this, COREnology is an assessment, and the very number one thing we do is we give every single member of the family their top 5 core values. And so every other member of the family can see what their values are, and it facilitates conversations within the family. And so that is a place to start having these talks. And the core values can turn into a GPS or a guiding light into making the big family decisions, including what they do with their finances in the long run. So, what do you think as I talk about this? What, in your experience, are some of the mistakes that wealthy families can make when they're structuring their actual estate plan, making these decisions? I'm talking about a GPS. Well, how do they make these decisions?
Well, obviously, once the self-discovery, the family self-discovery, if you will, has come out,
Mhm.
right? And we have a clear idea of the members of the family, what their values are, the collective values of the family, their communication styles, what their collective values will be. And I now know what I need to implement, right? When they tell me that they've got a goal of some sort of generosity or charity, however that might look within somebody's plan. Well, now I know that I have some tax play. I mean, I usually not ahead of the game by giving money to charity, right? Yeah, you get the tax write off, but you're usually better off keeping the money in your pocket at the end of the day and paying taxes on it if you want the money. But if you're going to do that anyway, and I love generosity being part of the family, right? It puts
Mhm.
something above the family, beyond the family. Um, well, now I can leverage that with one of my favorite things to do, which is to save taxes. So, making sure that the alignment of the intangible core values is there with the tangible assets, the money,
Mhm.
and then I can work in all of the various tax tools and asset protection tools and estate tax tools that need to take play. So yeah, I think that's the first thing that wealthy families do incorrectly is they start with all of the documents and the tools first, and they don't put much effort into thinking about exactly what they're building. I say this all the time. They allow the advisor to tell them what they want instead of telling the advisor what they want. And it's a very, very, it doesn't matter. I mean, I've worked at a number of law firms in my career, and a wealthy family, a family of, say 20 million plus, their estate planning documents look a whole lot alike to somebody that's worth less than $1 million, right? They're all, we all forms that we start with, and the issue though is that the family issues that those two families are facing are going to be different. Not that
Mhm.
one's more important or less important, but because of tax regulations and so forth, one's going to be more complicated than the other. And you're just not going to have a structure if it's well manicured and well planned out for that first client that looks the same as the other. You can still import for both of that clients that are, lower net worth, the higher net worth, all of the purpose, the values and so forth, and how that money will be managed past their passing. But you've got to put other implications in mind that are more objective, like tax implications, and even for objective reasons, like when assets pass on to beneficiaries, it should never go to them outright. It should always stay in trust for the rest of their life. And they could potentially become trustees of their own trust at some point, but there's some huge benefits to that. I can't tell you 95% of the trust that I still see on a regular basis when I say a new client's referred in my way and I'm looking at their estate planning that they have could be a huge client. They still have at their death, each of the kids get a trust. And when they're 25 years old, it starts getting doled out to them. And, if that happens, you're 30 years old and you've gotten your last check from the trust, do you care what the trust says about core values? No, it's a bunch of words on paper. There's no money in it. There's no meaning, force, or effect behind it. So there's a lot of problems that I see even in clients that have an estate plan done. Now, in those clients that have done an estate plan, which is really only about 30% of the population, those estate plans usually haven't even been reviewed for the last 18 years. You just do it,
That's
you
incredible.
forget about it, and think how much changes even in a year. So it's yeah, wealthy families are no different than anybody else. Life is busy. Things get in the way. You're raising kids, you're paying taxes, and you just don't look at it. And life events start to take place. I always get phone calls around vacation time. Andrew, we're going on a vacation. We haven't updated our guardianship yet. Or I'm having a medical procedure, or there was a death in the family, and it reminded me, hi, I need to get back and look at this. Now, that's another thing that wealthy families, I think, don't do very well. They don't demand enough of their advisors. You should expect a certain level of a connection to that advisor and direct contact. So much is automated these days, but every year I reach out to my clients, whether I've heard from them or not. And that's just to remind them, not that hey, I'm still alive, right? But hey, remember when I told you don't buy something in your name, buy it in the name of your trust to avoid probate? Oh yeah, but we did buy that new vacation property and we forgot to do that. So it allows us to, just maintain it. Maintenance is a huge thing that I see people not do very well within their planning.
So, Andrew, how do you take someone's plan where they're really focused on purpose? They understand their core values. They are talking as a family. How do you put that into their estate plan?
Yeah, that's where a little bit of the rubber meets the road and some of the magic comes into play. I'll tell you how I've done it in my plan for my kids. If something happens to my wife and myself, hopefully many, many years from now, right? Many years from now.
Hopefully.
Because we intend on our kids having the Prince Charles syndrome, right? Just waiting for the old lady to die. But let's say something else happens earlier and my wife and I pass, each of our kids will get a trust for their benefit, but it doesn't ever go outright to them. It stays in trust for their entire lifetime. Now I have parameters about when they can have access in terms of maybe even control over those trust assets. And it's there for their health and education and maintenance and support and kind of all of those standard things, what we call the HEMS standard, health, education, maintenance, and support. But then if you were to also look at my trust, you would see that my COREnology report, or, I've probably done a little bit more to it than other people might, but my report is attached to my trust. And then what my
Okay.
trusts say for my kids is that my trustees, who I leave in charge of it until I leave the kids in charge at some point. And I hope at some point I can look at my kids and think tomorrow you guys would be great at running whatever I might leave you. But they're 19, 17, and 15, and current behavior is not
Right.
pointing to the brightest future. Oh, I've got time to turn this thing around, but they're good kids. But at some point in time, I might allow them to control it. But until that time, I have other people that will control it and they will govern it under the standards that I lay out in my COREnology report, under our core values. Like one of our family core values is entrepreneurship. And
Okay.
that would mean as an example, my kids could take money from their trust, kind of a family banking concept, but they could borrow money from their trust to go start a business. But they don't just get the money, right? They have to come back to my board of trustees, who consists of people that I trust in my life. They'll have to ask them for, a business loan, and they have to prepare a business plan. And now my trustees can help them manicure that so that it works great. And they have to be held accountable, right? If they blow the money, guess what? They're going to have to answer for that, because every year my kids have to come back at our family reunion and give a status of what's going on. They took a loan from our family and they're teaching each other, right? I want my kids to be in business with each other. There's, I think, this idea that give everybody their own piece and let them go do what they want with it. The wealthiest families I know do not even think like that at all, right? You take, people talk the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds. They're family businesses. They concentrate their wealth. They don't disperse it. So I want to encourage and foster that within my family. And if my kids want to work together on a business, wonderful. I'd say don't get in business with family. Don't get really. Is that what you
Yeah.
want to foster in your family? I want them to be in business with each other. So the idea of how those values of entrepreneurialism can be passed on through that legacy, it can all be done within the trust, and it can be done inside a revocable trust for a husband and wife, two and a half kids that have a net worth less than $1 million. Well, their $1 million is just as important to them as my $50 million clients $50 million is to them, right? It's just as
Absolutely.
important. So now you got to do
And
different stuff with that 50 million than the million.
well, and their kids are just as important. They love their kids the same, and so they want that outcome.
Absolutely.
I love you and I have talked before, about your grandfather and how he was such an influence in your life. I'm curious what kind of example he set in the context of teaching you and your family to be prepared for when he passed away.
Yeah. So, mean, first of all, he was a good example just in life. He lived his life to a very high standard. He devoted to his family, provided for everybody well. Some cases probably overly well, but he was just an example to me of what, let's say, the a man should be, as cliche as that might sound. And I apologize if how cliche that does sound, but he was a good example. He was a great mentor. I think on our last one we talked a lot about how he, had me down at his office and working and see how he did it. But he did the same thing within our family dynamics. I mean, behind the curtains, when we were meeting with family advisors, he included us. We were there. I don't know how early we started. I always say it was like 11 or 12, but I just, candidly, I honestly do not know. But we were there early and just sitting there watching, him pick stocks. He loved to pick his own stocks and he'd do his research on it. And this was back before the mutual fund days where everybody just wants to get you into a money advisor. So it was fun and he made it enjoyable. Sometimes there were tears, usually by my sister or something at some point in time. But no, it was something that we actually started to look forward to. We'd have lunch afterwards. It was just a nice experience, and I that's how I grew up in terms of hearing the discussions about money. It was a positive thing. It was what can
Right.
we do with it? What is it going to enhance our family? It wasn't a negative thing at all. So I just it's how I grew up, right? And I got out of high school. I went to a private school here in Salt Lake, and a lot of my colleagues in that school were probably getting a lot of that same education. But when I got into college, it was different, right? I mean, I knew how to prepare a tax return. I knew how to write off losses and all of these kind of things at 18 years old. And going through my fraternity, my fraternity brothers. What am I talking about? Right? It wasn't exactly the most exciting guy at the party, but the idea is I had that in immersement. I had the environment around me. I was brought in. I was included, and that I think is what he did above all. Is really included the family in the overall process, not the decision
Yeah.
making, right? It was clear who the pecking order was and who was making the decisions, but he was showing us he was showing us not just what it meant to be wealthy, but how to be wealthy, not just make how to make the money, but once you got it, what do you do with it? And how do you continue that wealth beyond? And I was just showing us how to do it.
I love that. Love that so much. And I think that as we wrap up our conversation today, maybe we can talk about how can an advisor be kind of follow your grandfather's example and how they interact with the families they're advising, because ultimately that's what they're doing, advising entire families on how to healthfully manage their wealth. What do you think about that?
If I was if I was a financial advisor and let's say I was starting my practice or I was wanting to really recognize what's going on here and get ahead of the curve before it's the tsunami that hits you, I would put something like COREnology at the forefront. I would, before I met with a client, I would make it very clear that what I cared about is what they wanted to ultimately accomplish within their family. And how does an advisor have that conversation? Well, there's got to be some sort of process. And what's nice about, like, if I was an advisor, what COREnology would do is I just send them an email, right? Everybody member of the family gets an email. They click on a link, they take a 30-minute survey, and we got a 50-page report that tells me everything about that family to a deeper degree than any other kind of personality test or anything like that might have. I mean, you think about that in terms of that first meeting that I have with that client. I have this 50-page report about their core values. And am I gonna handle that meeting differently than if I didn't? And how much more impactful is that meeting going to be between me and that client and the other advisor who isn't doing something like this? Who is that client more likely to work with? You're both going to be able to get them in the same mutual fund, right? But if you're the one coming at them with purpose and family, but also including the next generation, I don't want to just know you guys. I want to know your kids. Bring them in the next meeting. Have them do the COREnology survey, right? Those are the kind of advisors that I think are going to stand out as this next this tsunami, this wave of assets get transferred from one generation to the next.
Well, and some advisors are really thinking of this. They're afraid of what's going to happen, the clients they're going to lose. But really, I think this is a wonderful opportunity for advisors because if an advisor is doing something different, if they are seeing and hearing who the family is, why they are the way they are, this is a huge opportunity to get so many more clients because they're leaving and they're going somewhere else.
Yep.
And so, where will they land is the question. And I hope that as a company, we're helping advisors be prepared to let those families land with them because it gives them the opportunity to know who the family is, what the family values, why they're valuing those things, and connect to them on a deeper level.
That's absolutely right. Yep. I mean, we see that one licensee of ours that's not the one, but we have a few of them, but it's a law firm, and it's completely now based upon COREnology, right? In that process of really understanding the core values of the family. And I mean, I applaud that guy. It's kind of my competition, I guess, but I really like it. I think that it's so advisable. I mean, we have our other financial advisors at the high level doing this already, and it's impactful. Even just talking about it and knowing what you're talking about, what these terms all mean and how they actually can be incorporated, it's going to put you ahead of the curve by these people that are out there using all the terms and they don't know what the hell it means. So yeah,
I totally agree.
I 100%, if I was coming out of college and I wanted to be a financial advisor, start a firm, or I was a firm that, let's say, wanted to rebrand itself or say, hey, what does our next chapter look like? Things are different than it's been in the past on a number of different areas. Okay, how do we do that? Well, I'd say, okay, I'm going to brand myself as being that advisor that listens to the client first, finds out who they really are, who their family is, encourages involvement of all of the family members. I'd want to be known as that advisor, probably more than the advisor that gets an extra percent or two return on the client's funds. I just don't think that's going to be the way that you keep the client any longer.
I totally agree. And everything out there, all of the studies and surveys are agreeing with what we're saying. And so I would love to just wrap up today. If you're an advisor or a planner, estate planner watching us, and you're wondering, what are we talking about? What's going on? We would love to show you. Feel free to give us a call or email me at gretchen@corenology.com. And we would love to show you what we're doing to change the industry. We are hoping that when people out there hear, oh, that advisor uses COREnology, it means that advisor cares about their people and their clients. And more and more advisors are doing this. And so if you want to be a part of it, just let us know. We're happy to help. And Andrew, I'm looking forward to having more conversations with you here soon.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thanks so much, Gretchen.
Thanks for being with us. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Talk to you soon.